Yes. So, hey to everyone. Hey
Hello.
Alexander.
Hey, Fabrice.
Yes, let me just check everything is good. I just think, yeah. I think no, it's good. We are in live.
Nice.
so, um, okay. Can you still hear me? Sorry. Okay.
Well, I definitely do can see and hear you, so I hope our audience can
Okay, yeah,
see
okay,
and
no,
hear.
I'm back, I'm back. Okay, so here we go. Hey to everyone. I hope you are doing great. Today, we got some, I can say, really important men in tech ecosystem in general, especially with Flutter. So, hey Anna. so I will let you present, introduce yourself first, before we just start. But before that, I just got like I can say introduction question. So so you involved in tech, you have been working on tech for a long time now. You got like a lot of experience, but what do you think about the evolution of mobile first, for next year?
Mhm.
Mm.
Evolution of mobile for next year. That might be
Yeah, like,
interesting. Like that's a really interesting question because people in general are really bad at predicting future. So it's especially taking into consideration all that stuff that's going on right now with Gemini, with some projects that you see that like Copilot became
yes.
really an important part of our IDEs. Like if you look at, for example, Maestro testing tool, they decided to, I don't know, not to fix some really critical issues. Come on, folks from Maestro, please do make proper iOS support, but instead they introduced some sort of artificial intelligence in their projects also.
Mm.
So it's extremely hard right now to predict how that thing will look like in, I don't know, 3 years, five
Yeah.
years. Will we all develop software for mixed reality or augmented reality? Will Apple win that battle? That's really hard, to predict what's going to be next. But I think that in the next year, probably things will not change that much. I would expect that tools that appear today will become even better. I don't expect that we will not need to write mobile applications ourselves. Like, for example, so many people currently believe in um, some sort of constructors where you can adjust, I don't know, visually, like sort of Figma, where you create design and then it will generate the application for you. I'm not that sure. Maybe not in the nearest future. That most probably one day some company will succeed in building such a tool for a general use, but probably not next year.
Okay, so you are not, I can say, afraid for, I can say, 5 or next 10 years from now, as far as developer.
I want to say that I'm afraid of something or like I really concerned or like, hey, AI will take our jobs.
Mm.
AI will not take your job. That engineer who used AI better than you do might take your job though. So
Mm.
that's not something that you should ignore. Like you really should invest some time and understand what AI capabilities are in the market already, and you should not ignore it for sure. But come on, don't be afraid. Like I'm pretty optimistic on that. I don't believe that AI will take our jobs and will make mobile developers redundant.
Okay. Because I just saw a post on, I think it was on Twitter, and someone was saying that nowadays, um we are it is not like really good to tell your, I can say, your child or your children to still learn programming language, because in some years it will just disappear. So yeah, I just found it like very funny, because now I think we are going to still need developer even if we got some AI tools. Um, but now
But
just
what does it mean, like, to learn programming languages? Like, are you sure that programming language is the core of our profession? Like, I'm not sure. Like, I already switched between different languages, and before Dart, I was a really, really good, at least not bad, C# engineer. And I barely remember C#. And so what? Like, C# is just a tool, and language is not that important. Concepts are important, patterns are important. And I think that when that book, the classical Gang of Four book, was published, probably in 1994,
yeah.
and to me, it's still actual. Like, come on, it was so many years ago, and it's still there. So invest your time in patterns, in generic understanding, in all that knowledge, and don't stress enough that in 5 years you will not write your mobile applications in Dart, but instead you will use prompt engineering for that. Like, on some level of abstraction, it will be the same.
Yeah, sure. So before we just launched the live, I was asking you why did you decide to choose Flutter? But before you just try to give the response, I will let you introduce yourself first, then answer to this response. Yeah, to this question.
Right. Yeah, so hey everyone, my name is Oleksandr. I'm Google developer expert in Flutter and Dart from Ukraine. I have been written mobile applications, cross-platform mobile applications for over a decade now, like probably 12 or 13 years already. Before that, I worked as a backend engineer and write some desktop applications. And I even have one game in my portfolio. So but like most of my career, I developed cross-platform mobile apps. Started with Marmalade. I expect that most of you folks never heard of that SDK. And then I switched to MonaTouch. Like, that was a brand new framework from Mona. Like, that was a framework that eventually became Xamarin. So yeah, for quite a few years, I've been written applications in C#, and for since Flutter version 0.5, I'm a Flutter engineer. And why I decided to switch to Flutter? Well, mostly that was a strategic decision for my team. Back then, I was head of a mobile team at Cyclone. Cyclone is one of the biggest Ukrainian outsourcing companies, and we had a cross-platform mobile development department. So I was a technical leader in that department, and
Which
we
framework or language did you use before decide to switch? As
sorry, at the beginning.
yeah. I was asking which language or framework did you use before decide to switch to the Flutter with your team?
That was Xamarin, so that was C#.
Okay,
We made some proof of concepts with F#, and unfortunately, it was really hard to find engineers and maintain projects in F#. So that was just an experiment. So mostly that was C#, and most of frameworks that we used there, clearly everything was built on top of Xamarin Forms, but we've created some in-house frameworks for the development. I don't expect that you folks know them. Probably they are internal for the company I work with.
Okay, nice. So I can say so you just decide to use Flutter to I can say to improve the mobile development for your team, right? Basically.
We worked for many companies, many clients, and At some point, it became clear that Microsoft probably not abandoned Xamarin, but it wasn't that was time of Swift UI already somewhere on horizon, and it was clear that declarative nature, like the declarative patterns, probably are more efficient in mobile development world, and like React Native is a good proof of that. So we investigated, like, maybe we need to switch from Xamarin to React Native, and apparently that's a holy war topic right now, because I don't want to say that React Native is a bad framework and you should not use it, and it's definitely a bad choice. It might be a good choice, it might be a bad choice. It depends on many different things. And we tried React Native and we were not really happy with it. But then we noticed that, hey, it looks like there is a rising star, in Google, and it looks really promising. Like back then, Fuchsia was still a thing, so it was unclear whether Google will continue Android development or maybe they will switch to Fuchsia completely. So that was a moment of uncertainty, and we just decided, like, oh, all right, let's invest some time and see how it's go. Because if that would be if Fuchsia will be a thing, that's nice. We already will have some expertise with the framework that's like the main framework, the main technology for developing applications for Fuchsia. If not, well, we'll get some expertise with cross-platform framework, which is a good thing too. And even before Flutter release, we already believed that, hey, it looks like Flutter is a really nice framework. Like, it's super simple. We'll like it more than React Native. It's definitely allows us to write better applications than we were able to write with Xamarin. So probably we need to invest some time. And to be honest, that was just the point where I never came back. Like, after that, I was a Flutter engineer for 100% of my time.
That's a great story. I like this one. And there is, by the way, I'm just going to ask some question we got in comment section. It is, how do you see the future as Flutter developer? I think we were talking about that some minutes ago, but yeah, what is the future of Flutter for next year, for example?
Well, my answer would be pretty much the same, because it's really hard to predict the future. Like, the future in 100 years, probably we will not use Flutter. In 50 years, probably we will not use it too. In 10 years, I don't know, probably we will not use Flutter. In 1 year, I think Flutter will still be there and it still will be a thing. Just, I really like Flutter. I'm a Flutter engineer myself. I don't invest my time in other frameworks. Well, I do invest them, but mostly for educational purpose. And like, as a Flutter engineer, you still need to understand native platforms. So you really need to take your time and get some basics from SwiftUI, from Compose, and all that other stuff. But like, Flutter, do not learn Flutter with that vision that it will be the only framework that you'll learn in your life and you'll use it forever. No, probably not.
Yeah. Okay. So I hope that you just get the advice Oleksandr just gave you. Try to learn Flutter, but try to learn what is very important so you can switch if in the future there is something you can change. Now we are going to start talking about the reason that we are here. But what is the importance of testing app, or why should you test your app, for example?
Alrighty. Well, my previous recommendation was not to concentrate on some specific things, but rather learn patterns, learn generic stuff. And testing is one of the most valuable skills you can get as an engineer, not only mobile engineer, but just software developer in general.
Yeah.
So Why is it important? Well, because that's probably the easiest way for you or for any other engineer to prove that your application works. And that's a tricky thing. Like, what does it mean that application works, right? Because, like, all right, I can run my app on my device. Does it mean that it works? Well, maybe at some point, at some level, but probably it's more about requirements and specifications. So in advance, you or maybe other folks, like if you are creating an application for yourself, then probably you're a product owner, you have the vision, you're a customer of the application, and you know what you want to build. If you're working in a team, probably there will be someone, some business analyst or some product owner who might guide you, like what is needed, how the application should behave, and what features you're working on, and all that stuff. And working application is the application that works according to requirements. It's not about bugs. It's not about, I don't know, other things. It's about requirements. And so you can prove that your application works in two ways. You can just test your code all the time and test your application. By the way, that's a really important thing. Test not your code, test your application and check whether it still conforms to some requirements. Or you can automate that stuff, because it's really hard, to do regression testing of the whole application each time you deliver a new feature. And if complexity of your project becomes really high, then it's super easy to mess up something and not, predict how changes in one part of the application can absolutely, in a weird way, affect other parts. So auto tests are super important. So I think that that's why I highly recommend everyone to learn how to test their
Okay.
apps.
One of the biggest app there in France is, maybe you have already heard about that, is SNCF Connect, and I have followed one of their conference, and they highlight the fact that they are using like classic test, just unit test, and but it wasn't like very enough, because they were using like mock, for example, sometime. But how do you think about using mock for your test? Like, is it good? Or because there is some people who say, yeah, you might not use mock sometime. You just need to fetch your data and try to make your test directly on
Right.
it.
Mock is an implementation detail. Let's try to understand why would you use mock, and then decide whether you need it. So, for example, instead of mock, you might use stub or spike or spy, or other things, and or fake, and all of them provides some sort of behavior. So probably you use mock to change the behavior of some part of your system. So the question is, why would you want to change the part of your system, to change the behavior of something? Probably, we do mocks in our tests, though it's not always the case. Like, as I said, mock is just one of patterns you can use. For example, you may see fakes in production code for something, and you may use fakes for testing, and to have sort of stub for some piece of functionality in your production code as well. So for testing, most probably you would use mock to abstract away some unit under test. And here is a really unclear thing, like unit under test. What's that? Like, we're talking about unit testing. So it's like testing of a unit, but what is unit? And here that's tricky, because so many engineers treat unit treat classes as unit, like they just say that class is a unit. And that's not really the case. But speaking of mocks, like most of time when you hear folks that dogmatically apply mocks, they just take one class and abstract it away from all like any other part of the solution. So here you use mocking. Do you need to do that? Let's try to find out. I convinced that mocks are extremely useful, but you don't need to mock everything. Why I think so? Because I do believe in test-first approach. And with test-first approach, like let's get back to the very beginning. What is test? It's some validation, some code that will validate whether our application or part of our system works according to some requirements. So we write a test not for a class, but for requirement. And that might be slightly unclear, like at the beginning, like what does it mean, write an test for something which is so abstract that it's not even a class. Well, in the end, it will be a class, but still, like you're writing a test for something, and then you're getting a failing test because of that, and then you're starting the implementation. Your only job on the second step of a test first approach, or TDD, for example, let's be specific, let's take TDD here. So the second step of TDD is to make your test pass. And you write absolutely horrible code here. Like you put everything in a single file. You don't care about naming conventions, about solid, about architecture in general. If you're talking about Flutter development, you put everything in your widget. You use set states instead of proper state management. Probably you can even make API requests, in widgets, and you don't need models because in the end, JSON will be a map of string dynamic, and you can work with that map. You don't need models for that. So on the second step, you're writing the worst implementation possible. And on the third step, you refactor. And the really important part here is that you cannot change tests anymore. You can change tests only on the first step where you write tests. So during the refactoring, you extract some code from that bad code that you've written. And on that stage, you will introduce some classes. You will introduce probably, I don't know, clean architecture or Redux or something. You'll introduce services, models, and all that other stuff. And you will not use mocks there because you should not even change your tests anymore, right? So in that case, you will use mocks to isolate your requirement or your feature from the rest of the system. For example, from real backend or real file system, or maybe even real UI, because you don't have to write proper end-to-end tests. You can use widget tests, for example, if you're talking about Flutter, and it will sort of simulate UI for you. So yeah, I don't believe that you need to mock everything, but mock is just a pattern, so use it when you need it.
Okay, yeah. And because we are in the, I can say we are directly talking about the test, there is someone who are asking that what percentage of your test do you, what is the percentage of your test do you write, or do you test? That is that was it is very funny because that was my next question. Like, should we test like every feature of our apps? Yeah.
I heard a really interesting answer to that question. Like, do you test each and every thing? Do you expect each and every thing to work in your mobile application? If yes, then probably you need to test it. But it's not always the case. Like some things I don't really care whether they work. And don't get me wrong,
Yeah, I understand.
by work I mean, for example, I will not probably write a test for a button. Let's say that we have a button that changes its color depending on some conditions. So I will write tests for these conditions, but for the color, I have two options here: to write a golden test, or to really check that in my widget tree there is a widget which is that button that I'm talking about, and its color is like something. Let's imagine that I will not write the test, and let's imagine that there is a bug. So the color is wrong. Like we expected it to be blue, but it's light blue, or even worse, green. All right. Well, I need to spend tons of energy for maintaining these tests. Like tests are not free. You will need to spend time for maintenance and for CI stuff. So you really need to pick your battle. Like, do you test each and everything? I test what I think is critical for the application. And what is critical, it really depends on the application, because for some screens, it's really important that the button is blue.
Yeah.
And then I would write the test.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we are hearing about a lot of concepts. I think because nowadays with, I can say, internet, some blog on Twitter, on LinkedIn also, there is some people talk a lot of about those kind of concepts like hexagonal architecture, onion architecture, screaming architecture, all of those kind of architecture. So and on Uncle Bob blog, he was saying that all of them was like very similar, but even if they have their own details. So what is like, I can say for you, the definition of clean architecture? Yeah.
Oh my God, please don't make me to come with a definition of clean architecture,
Yeah.
because that's a really tricky question. Like, if we be dogmatic, then probably by clean architecture we mean the architecture that Robert Martin or Uncle Bob described in his clean architecture book. At the same time, just try to Google clean architecture Flutter, and you'll see so many different implementations. Like, the majority of engineers agree that it's a good idea to split their code into 3 different layers,
Yeah.
like presentation,
Domain,
data, and domain.
presentation.
Yeah. And you know what? We have a guest,
Yo. Hey.
So most of engineers believe that it's a good idea, and I don't know, I'm not that sure. Like when you were mentioning different architectures, you mentioned hexagon architecture, clean architecture, like onion one, and screaming architecture. And these things are slightly, like, not different, but maybe you can have screaming architecture and clean architecture in the same project. Like, screaming architecture is something, I don't even think that there are some strict guidelines for that kind of architectures. It's just described that when you open a project, you need to understand what this application is doing, what it's all about. Like, if you're opening a source code for Twitter, it should look differently from the code of I don't know, some shopping application, or for some text editor. So, like, it's about splitting your code into different features and creating some sort of I think some folks might misunderstand me now if I say some domain that, like, people that understand that domain should open the application and immediately understand why it's split like that, and like what these modules mean. So inside these modules, there might be some other patterns, like for example, clean architecture. Let's imagine that each of your module confirms clean architecture, and you have the presentation domain and data layers there. And inside them, you have all that stuff that Uncle Bob and other engineers recommended us to create. Like you have a whole bunch of entities, models, use cases, data sources, repositories, and all that jazz. My favorite question when I see any new concept is why? Like, because I'm trying to understand why something is implemented like that. I'm convinced that every technical decision probably makes sense because someone wanted to solve a problem, and probably if you see some code, then that problem was solved. So
Yeah.
most probably, I have tail here. Most probably, there was a challenge, and some architectural decisions solved that challenge. Now you need to understand which challenges that engineers wanted to solve. And for most of cases, I think in mobile development, when you start thinking about clean architecture and challenges, you'll find that probably you don't need to take these fights. Like you don't need to solve these challenges because they, like, clean architecture is supposed to be applied on much larger scale and probably in slightly different situations. So when I see use case that just I don't know, that in fact is just a proxy to some repository, with just a proxy to some data source, like they're doing nothing. They just proxy some query, and they just I don't know, support data flow that might be redundant for your app. So my recommendation for architecture in general is to pick one. Like ideally, don't try to invent the architecture yourself. Pick one. Let it be clean architecture if you want. Like if you believe that clean architecture is great, just pick clean architecture, split everything into small modules, like follow screaming architecture pattern, and then start making some experiments on a single feature. Try to change something, try to remove some part of the application and see why it's not working anymore. And try to understand like why it might be a bad idea to get rid of repositories, for example, or to get rid of use cases. And you know what? At some point, you may find that, oh, I removed all use cases, so I've added repositories as dependencies to my block, and nothing changed. So
That's great point. But I have watched the it is TED or TIDE. I don't know how to call it, but TED presentation that you and Anna just did, like I was saying. And yeah, I found it amazing, by the way. And it looked like you are using like repository, which is returning, I suppose, like exception or data if everything is good, without having sometimes abstract class for those repository. Am I wrong or right? And why, for example, you are not using a lot of abstract class like we can just see on YouTube or in some article, like people who are using like a lot of, I can say, clean architecture model with Flutter. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. I think that we've made two talks together with Anna. The first one was on probably Flutter Vikings. It was called Liga style architecture. And recently we've shared the approach that we use at Tide. And at Tide, we have hundreds of really tiny packages. And in many of these packages, you may find, I don't know, just a few pages. So there will be just a few blocks and a few repositories there. So if you start experimenting, like let's implement, let's add abstract classes for repositories there. And we'll try to find the reason why we added them. Like, what might be the reason? For some languages, like, for example, Java, in Java, it's not possible to implement other class. You can extend a class, but you will implement interfaces. That's not the case with Dart. In Dart, you can implement a class. And from what we found when, to be honest, we found it even before we joined Tide, that that really makes these abstract classes somewhat redundant. Because if we need to write a mock for a repository, we can extend the mock, implement that repository implementation, like implement the implementation, and it will work. What other reasons? Like, hey, you can switch the implementations in runtime. And like, if you have different implementations of the repository, you can you have an abstract class and different implementations. I don't know. Let's be specific. For example, we've implemented a repository with some database and a repository that uses in-memory storage for something. And now you have that flexibility that, hey, I can switch the implementations. Will you do that? Like, do you need that? Because 99% of time, you don't. You don't do that. You have one-to-one mapping between abstract class and the implementation most of time. And when it is needed, you can do that. When it is needed, you can introduce an abstract class. So, like, I just like to have a purpose for any entity, and by entity I don't mean model. I mean for any class that I write. And if I'm focusing on something that I'm not using, then maybe I don't need it.
Okay. That's very interesting. I think we got someone who is saying, I think if we remove use case, then we need to write logic in the block, but implement logic is not the work of block. Yeah.
All right, yeah, a business logic component, right? So Bloc stands for business logic component, supposed not to have any logic and just listen to events and emit states. You can think of it like that. Like, I don't have a problem with that. If you use use cases and you like them and you see purpose in them, that's fine. I think that for many cases, like you will not write a single block for your whole application, right? Probably Bloc will be like really local, really small. And if you have a block with 300 lines of code, then probably it worth thinking about your UI layer and maybe redesign it a bit. If you think that you need use cases, they will simplify your block, and you have a problem with your block, that the complexity is that high, that it's really creates some issues with maintenance, fine, yeah, use cases.
Yeah. Okay. So, sorry. So it will depend on the project itself, but yeah. I just have some question there. Not what I just wrote, but when, for example, you start, I can say, new project, for example. Let's say you want to build like a new app. Did you start, for example, because you were talking about TDD? Did you start with the test itself first? Like just start with some, not use case, but think about the use case, then start to implement the test first and then the code? Or what is some basic when you just start new project? Like, let's just say it's one feature with just 1 or 2 page. Yeah. two pages.
Let's probably rephrase a tiny bit and let's focus on a feature instead, because my advice would be the same whether it's a new application or just a feature in the existing one. Probably some folks expect me here that I'll say that, no, I always start with test first because I said that I like test first approach. So probably here is the TDD guy who just write test first always and just follows that. No, that's not true. My advice here is the following. It really depends on on the level of uncertainty in your feature. If you don't know what you're going to implement right now, like you're working on some piece of functionality and you have no idea for now what it will look like. Clearly, you may, like if you're following that classic unit testing approach, you can create some entities, some use cases, repositories, write some boilerplate for all that stuff. And then you can find yourself in constant refactoring because apparently it could be that you would not need some parts of the implementation that you already implemented. And so you will need to remove some code and remove your tests. And like that's just a waste. So if the uncertainty is high, then I'm starting with the implementation and then I'm adding tests.
Okay.
For that, it's extremely important to track test coverage. It's extremely important to see, to track that you indeed wrote tests for every line that you've added, or maybe not. Again, that's back to the question, should we have 100% of test coverage? Like for everything that is important, then yeah, you just check yourself. If I'm confident in what I'm going to write, like it's just a simple feature, I don't know, I'm writing a login screen. I have requirements for that screen. I understand the feature. I understand the implementation. I just need to write it. Then, yeah, I will start with the test.
Okay. That's nice because currently I'm just working on like some, I can say very simple project. As developer, you already have one project. And I just start with TDD right now. I want to see like the real value of just using TDD itself. But maybe I will just give a response maybe in just 3 or 6 months when I will finish the project itself. But yeah, I found it also interesting. What is the best resource to learn write test or TDD? TDD is not just about writing tests, but I will let Oleksandr just give a response to that.
All right, yeah. TDD is indeed a technique, and probably it's a nice way to learn testing, like through TDD. It's just a practice that creates some rules for you, and these rules will probably help you to write better tests, because it's just easier to develop applications when you have answers to some of the questions. So TDD is just like a pattern that already provides common answers to some common questions. So I would highly recommend you, if you want to start doing TDD, I recommend you Test-Driven Development book by Kent Beck. It's pretty old, but I think that it's brilliant. And from that book, you'll learn about TDD and ATDD, which is even more important concept, I believe, acceptance testing. And that's a classical way of learning test and TDD. If you want to simplify your life and start getting benefits earlier, you may look at BDD approach. I see that I don't think that we have holy wars in community, which is better, TDD or BDD.
Before we just talk about BDD, sorry to cut you. It's not my habit, but what is the definition of BDD, because we just talk about TDD. I think people are starting to understand what is TDD, but what is BDD? Yeah, before we delve in.
All right. Yeah. So we have test-driven development and behavior-driven development, and the tricky part here is what is behavior, and and behavior is more about the requirements for your system. Like I would say that you may think of behavior as a synonym for some piece of functionality, some requirement for your system. So BDD is focusing less on the code and more on the implementation, on what we wanted to create. And in BDD, like you can write BDD with Dart. That's valid. You can do that, but usually BDD adapts use Gherkin, which is a special language. It's pretty much plain English most of the time, but with just some extra rules. Like, for example, you need to start your lines with some given, when, then, and, but words, and you structure your English description of the feature in just some special manner, and then you generate tests for your application from that. It's really hard to provide a comprehensive guide on BDD in such a short time, but probably 2 or 3 months ago, I was invited to talk, I think it was Flutter Riga meetup, and there I made some practical sort of workshop how to apply BDD for Flutter development, and I uploaded it on my YouTube channel. So if you're curious about how
Yes,
to,
I will add the link at the end. So you will send me the link. I will add in the description so people can check it.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, nice.
So just check that workshop, and I think it will be. It's clear enough. It will be clean enough for you to start using that technique, and if not, just ping me on YouTube or Twitter, because probably like I'm really excited about BDD topic. I think that it needs more attention, and like probably more engineers should at least try that approach, or at least know about
Yeah,
its existence.
what is very funny is I have watched some people talking about BDD, and then I start checking Gherkin language, how um, can we use it, and then how can you just implement it with Flutter. But I didn't try it, I can say technically, directly on some project. So for you who has already use some project with BDD, without BDD and with BDD. What is, I can say, those main difference? And my second question is with BDD, for example, um, does we does the using of BDD required, I can say, a large project with a large team? Or, for example, if you are just working on, I can say, some small project or middle project, and you are just 2 and 3, did you really need like BDD? Because I suppose that you are working on, I don't know, a soft version of WhatsApp, or I don't know, just chat app, for example, and you don't have I can say feature from clients. It is just you who are working on your own project. So do you really require like using BDD, for example?
Okay. Well, here we are back to the question whether you need to write tests like at all. And it depends, or for specific features, for example, or specific parts of your application. Well, it depends whether you want to test your application manually each time you make some product increment, implement some feature, or you want to automate that stuff. If you want to automate this stuff, then BDD might help you here, because With BDD, you will think of your features of requirements in advance. You will formalize them, and you will be sure, always sure, that at least these requirements work, like your application conforms to these requirements. So I think that this is extremely valuable knowledge, to know that at least some parts of your application works. Does it make sense to apply BDD for any project? I'd say that probably you don't need BDD or maybe, oh my God, testing at all when you are working on proof of concept, because proof of concept is just some code that that's supposed to be, I don't know, deleted at the end of that proof of concept, because it's just a proof. It's not MVP, it's not minimum viable product. It's not something that's supposed to be used later on. It's just proof of concept.
So yeah, sorry, I will cut you. Just if not, I will forget just the question. So do you think if you got because I think there is a lot of people who are just watching us. Maybe they are working on their own project. Maybe they are thinking about building, I don't know, the next big startup of liquor. But so if they are working off the POC version, they don't really need to test, I can say, the feature, because a lot of time when you are working on the POC, your POC, it is maybe at least one or two feature, at least, I suppose. So the doesn't need to really test those. Doesn't really need to test to use tests, for example, and just focus on the main functionality. And then when they will move to the MVP, so they can use testing, for example, or
yeah, it depends on how these engineers will use that code that they have written for proof of concept. Because like proof of concept is just a proof by its definition. It's not complete feature. It's just, hey, can we do something? Can we prove that we can build it? Oh yeah, it looks like we can build it. Or good proof of concept, by the way, should really be challenging. Like if you are 100% sure that yes, you will be able to implement some functionality, that's not a proof of concept, that's an MVP. And for MVP, probably, not probably, I would recommend writing tests. If you're unsure, if it's just a 50-50 chances that it will not work, you will just throw away that code that you're currently about to write, then yeah, probably you should start with it. But proof of concept will not take a week for implementation, for example, or 2 weeks. It's something small, and you need to be ready to get rid of that code. So yeah, if we are talking about some features like, hey, let's implement an application with 2 features and we'll see, that's not proof of concept. That's already an application, like NC. I really like the concept, not minimum viable product, but minimum lovable product. Like if you want to show some product to real users and check whether your idea works, you don't need to create a proof of concept for that. You need to create some small product that users will love. And for that, I think you need tests, because you don't want to get back to fixing issues and trying to reverse engineer requirements that you try to implement with your code later.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Thanks. Okay. So what is I can say, because we are talking about some props using like BDD. What is isn't there some cons, like some disadvantages for using like BDD, for example, or some limits, not disadvantages, but I can say limit, limitation.
It's really hard for me to find any, because in the end, BDD is just a technique, just an approach that helps you write tests. And I think that here the question is mostly about disadvantages of writing tests. So
Yes.
Well, yes, you need to spend time. You need to maintain these tests. You need to implement proper CI that
Mm,
will run these tests, and like it's not enough to just write tests. You need to use them. You need to make them useful. And the scariest part here is that you need to spend some time mastering that skill of writing tests. You cannot just write tests like you don't have that knowledge. You don't. You will not be able to write good tests from the beginning. Sorry, that is
sure.
something that you need to master. That's like it's slightly different from application development. So
Yeah.
you'll need to learn some patterns from the area that you're probably not familiar with right now, and that's extremely painful for example, senior engineers who already write applications for I don't know 5 years, for example, and then they need to start from the ground. They need to admit that hey, there is an area which I don't have experience in. I need to learn. So yeah, you would need to look at some area with junior eyes. So that might be tough,
Yeah.
but after you do that, after you learn how to test your applications properly, that's not that hard, by the way. I think that you will get much more benefits from it than otherwise.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. We were talking about TDD at the beginning, and we were saying that, yeah, you need to write your test. If it fails, check your code, refactor it.
Mhm.
Um, but with BDD, is it, I can say, is it following like almost the same rules? Or because with BDD, first of all, you are just going to write some text, if I can call it like that, with Gherkin, right? What is
Mhm.
the process itself? For example,
Yeah.
if you just take one use case or feature.
Mhm. The process is the same. So both TDD and BDD are test first techniques.
Okay.
So which means that you start with test. The
Mm,
difference is that usually in vanilla TDD you write tests for classes, while with BDD you focus on requirements, but you
mm,
still need to write failing test first and not dive into implementation straight away, because one day, and by the way, if you'll really follow test first approach, that day will come in 2 or 3 months probably. um, you will write a test that's supposed to fail and it will pass, and you'll be so surprised.
mm,
So it's really important to start with failing test in both TDD and BDD, and it is extremely important rule that you cannot change test after you have a failing after you wrote a failing test. Like when you're starting working on code, you cannot go back and change your tests to I don't know to adjust them for your implementation.
Okay. Before I can say we delve to the conclusion and end. Um, what is very funny is yesterday I just make a mistake with the thumbnail, and I just put DDD. So first of all, sorry for that. But I want to know, how do you think about DDD itself approach? Because
Mhm.
some, I can say TDD, I can say user. So use also DDD sometime, like starting with domain first, like with some use case, then implement a test. Yeah. What do you think?
So DDD sounds like something from TDD or BDD world, but it's not. So DDD is not a test first technique. It's domain driven design, and it's a technique that will help you to write your application, to understand your application better by starting with proper domain modeling. And it's a really powerful technique, though it's not even when I'm thinking of DDD, I imagine experts, not engineers, experts in some domains, Like, it's not about value objects, for example, like, hey, DDD is about some value objects, like, for example, for login flow, we have
Yeah.
verified and
The reason that
unverified emails.
I sorry for cutting you again, but the reason that I ask this question is a lot of tutorials. I don't want to make a tutorial on DDD, for example, because it is not something that I master and I know how to use it. So, but in some tutorials or some blog I have already read, they choose, like, I can say, some just basic feature, and they just start with the class definition. So I found it like too basic to really understand what is DDD value. So yeah, sorry, you can continue.
Yeah, so for proper domain modeling, you need domain experts. And ideally, these experts need to understand the code. So you, together with experts, you clarifying or like trying to understand which models you have. For example, verified, unverified emails, but like, for emails, it's not even, you don't really even need DDD technique for login page modeling. I see the most benefit of DDD in complex domains, like, for example, medicine or banking systems. Like, if you have non-technical folks in your team who help you with the development, like some experts, for example, like 15 years ago, I worked in a company that develops a blood bank system. So
Okay.
it's extremely complex domain, and it's you need to learn, like to have ideally maybe even some degree to really understand how things work there. So
Mm,
we had some consultants. You can ask some domain experts. You can ask and clarify some parts of the complex domain, and together with these experts, you show them something, some probably not Dart code, because like most of teams that I worked with that used DDD, they used some other languages, and like maybe you can go with even UML or something
mm,
that's scary.
okay.
And you're talking about some domain knowledge. With them, you make then you translate that domain understanding in code, and when you're doing that, then value objects and all that other stuff that usually associated with DDD comes in. So if you really want to understand more about DDD, I highly recommend you book Domain Modeling Made Functional.
Okay.
Unfortunately, shame on me, I don't remember the author, but you can Google F# for fun and profit site,
Okay.
and it's there.
Mm,
So yeah, it's just a brilliant book. I cannot express enough how beautiful it is.
nice. Let me just write it. So I will check it later. Um, nice. I think we got one question, but I don't really understand the question. I will try to show it. So for Flutter, one should no normal hat.
It's
Ah,
really hard. If I understood the question correctly, for Flutter, do you need to be an expert in Dart, or it's fine to use some practical Dart, something that just allows you to write applications and that's it? Well, from my experience, from what I see when like, for example, during interviews, I see that not that many engineers really adopted pattern matching, because it's just, well, that's such a new feature, like never had a chance to play with it. And they still work on Flutter applications, on really big ones. And like, to me, pattern matching is not an advanced concept, but probably it's above some average code that you usually write. and that's fine. So yeah, I think that when I learned Dart, I started with the effective Dart part of Dartlang website, and yeah, I think that if you read effective Dart and apply that knowledge, that should be really good enough for you. So
Okay.
you will be able to write it. Fabrice, what's your opinion on that?
That's great question. I think because I think he asking this question because he's beginner. So I will try to put myself as at my old Fabrice, as beginner. Um, I think when you are beginner, we can try to think that it is not very important to go, I can say, delve into some deeply concept, as for Dart, for example, because if you just check online like Flutter tutorial, you are going just to have like everyone talking about the visual, the front of the Flutter, and try to build some apps. So I think at the beginning, yeah, you can just start with Flutter itself without knowing any deeply concept with Dart. But as long you are continue to, if you want to grow, of course, you are going sometime to check those kind of concepts, So you are going to learn that. Sometimes it is very important to check also the documentation. So you are going to face, for example, some issue that you will need to check the documentation of Dart in order to resolve those kind of issue. So don't don't focus only on the Dart learning, but you can learn both together. By using Flutter and try to create, I can say, new app, working on the app. Yes, you are going to face some issue that will require you to check the documentation of the Dart in order to solve them. So yeah.
Yeah, and just wanted to add that please do not stop learning and looking for new stuff, because that's so common when engineers learn how to use getX or Bloc or provider, and they never try any other state management solution, or like they become familiar with SQLite and ignore all other databases. I'm not saying that you need to use all different frameworks in a single application, but it's really beneficial to just know what concepts are behind other popular frameworks that you are not using, because that might make you a better engineer.
Hmm. I think I'm not just your only fan there. You got a lot of fans. So hey to everyone.
Thanks, folks.
That's great. Yeah, before we just end, because I know it's late, but before I let you now, for example, what advice would you give to someone who want to start mobile development? Like, if this person is beginner, and what like roadmap you will tell him to follow nowadays if you want to learn mobile development, especially Flutter? Yeah.
You know what's funny? A few years ago, I created a Flutter roadmap, like a very
I saw
subject. Yeah. So feel free to check the roadmap that I already created. Like it covers many technical aspects, and my recommendation on the order, in which you probably can learn all that stuff. But what is not there, and what's extremely important, is try to find a mentor. Try to find a person who will guide you, not just like yeah, you can follow some guides from the internet, and probably if you're lucky you will be able to find proper guidelines, proper tutorials that will teach you some good practices. That's not always the case. Like there are so many not that quality or comprehensive articles on the internet. So I don't know. I would really recommend you to find a mentor, a person who will help you with your very first steps.
Nice. And my last question. I think this is one question that I have been thinking for some month now, and maybe we will invite Anna for that topic. But let me ask you this question as lead, because you have been working as developer, but you are also lead. You are talking a lot about Flutter stuff, and I suppose that you have been doing a lot of recruitment, like to recruit people, new people who want to maybe add tide, for example. So,
Mhm.
um, what is the most important thing when you want to recruit someone or to hire someone? For example, if this person need to work with you, and there is a lot of also I can say beginner and intermediate developer that are learning Flutter, and they not find maybe they are finding job opportunity, but
Mhm.
maybe during the interview they didn't really know how to sell themselves. What is the most I can say? Yeah, those most important thing that you just take into account before you hire someone. Yeah.
Mhm. All right. Yes, that's a really interesting question because if I understood it correctly, it's not from the candidate's point of view, like not
No, no,
what
no.
I need to, but yeah, from interviewers.
From
And
Alexander point of view now.
yeah, from Alexander's point of view, like Alexander would think in advance on why am I hiring, like at all, why I opened the position in my team,
Mhm,
and based on that, it will become clear what level, engineer's level, I need to look for, and what responsibilities that person will get. So that will help me to structure my interview process and adapt it for the position that I'm going to hire a person. Then I will need to think in advance about questions because I think that each position is unique and questions might be different. I
mhm,
prefer to ask similar questions to my candidates
mhm,
because uh, the questions I ask usually are really generic, but answers are not. So I try to understand what that person values and the previous experience of that engineer. And I really like that's probably only me already, but I really love when engineers put their GitHub accounts in their CVs because I do homework. Like I prepare for each interview and I
yes,
try to get as much information about the person I'll be interviewing in advance. So I will review this some projects, and if I'll see that someone, I don't know, is working on some project with absolutely horrible quality, that will not be a no for the interview. But um, oh, sorry for that. I just seen that they didn't consider me. Sorry, don't know about that, but yeah, usually I review that, and that will not be a reason for me to reject that person, that candidate, but that will change the interview process a bit. I will ask about personal projects. If I'll
okay,
see like really great projects in GitHub, that would be a reason to talk about them too, and that would increase chances of passing the interview. So
okay,
yeah, like if you're going to hire a person, first thing you need to understand is why do you want to hire a person, and based on that you will be able to create a proper process.
okay. So if you just, for example, yeah, let me go more deeply. If you have two different profile, just someone who I can say he has good background, he or she, it will depend.
Mhm.
has like good background. He talk about not talk, but um, you can see on his GitHub or LinkedIn profile that he have already worked with some code company or so. And another part, we just got a second person who has profile more oriented on his own project. For example, he really like build project for himself, and he now looking for a job. Which one are you going to consider more? Like,
It's usually more complicated than that, like you really need to talk to both these folks, and you uh, like technical aspect is not everything. Like you really need uh, to meet that person, to talk to them, and so like it's not only about technical excellence.
okay, that's nice. I think we don't have question anymore. Even if Surav want to work at tight, it will happen maybe one day. And so, Alexander, I will let you if you have something to add. I will let you, yeah, just add it. If you
Yeah,
can
sure.
choose.
So, Fabrice, thank you so much for the invitation. It was really an interesting experience. So, thanks for that. And to our audience, folks, please do not stop learning new stuff. Try different approaches. Testing techniques. Testing is important. It's not that hard. Check my YouTube channel. Probably
Yeah.
you will be able to find a way how to step into BDD in a like a really simple way. So try that. Maybe, most probably, it will improve quality of your projects. And thanks for having me here.
Yeah, thanks also for accepting joining us. It was like huge pleasure. I think we can talk like for several hours, but we need to just leave there. Thanks for everyone who was there, and yeah, bye bye. See you.
See you.